Silence is not empty, my friends. It is full of answers. That's the truth most people never want to face. We grow up believing that words fix everything, that explanations and long conversations will always save the day. But let me tell you this. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop speaking. Not in anger, not in spite, but in a calm, steady silence that says more than 1,000 arguments ever could. Folks, when your silence enters the room, it doesn't come in gently. It hits like a hammer against glass, shattering illusions people had about you, about themselves, about the bond they thought would never break. Before we dive deep, press that like button and subscribe if you haven't already, because today we're going to break through some lies, expose some truths, and uncover what really happens when your silence becomes louder than your words. Stay with me, my friends, because this isn't just advice. It's a mirror you're going to see yourself in. Hey folks, imagine this for a second. Imagine being the sun that rises every single morning, faithfully painting the sky with light. People stop noticing after a while. They stop appreciating the glow because they assume it will always show up. But the day the sun doesn't rise, the world trembles. Panic spreads. That's what your silence feels like to someone who thought they could take your light for granted. They thought you'd always text, always call, always show up. But the moment you go quiet, it feels like the world tilted off its axis. That is the moment they finally start to understand your value. We're told lies, my friends. Lies like, if you care, you'll never stop showing it, or if you love someone, you'll fight until the end. Sounds noble, right? But here's the hard truth. Constantly proving yourself doesn't earn you respect. It drains you. Because love without boundaries is not love. It's self-betrayal. And silence, that moment you finally step back, is not weakness. It's strength. It's your way of saying, I will not beg to be valued. Think of it like a song, folks. When the music is playing non-stop, you dance without thinking. But when the music stops, the silence feels deafening, and suddenly you realize just how much that rhythm meant to you. That's what happens when your energy, your presence, your consistency disappears. People don't notice the beat until it's gone. And here's the fun part. We sometimes imagine they'll laugh it off, pretend they don't care, and on the outside, sure, they might post that I'm living my best life story or laugh extra loud around friends. But let's be honest, my friends, silence is not background noise. It's an earthquake under the surface. It shakes their ego, rattles their pride, and forces them to sit with thoughts they never wanted to face. Questions like, did I push too far? Did I just lose someone who actually cared? Did I mistake kindness for weakness? See, silence doesn't need fireworks to make an impact. It's like gravity, unseen but undeniable. You don't argue with gravity, you feel it. And when you stop chasing, when you stop filling the space with explanations, you become that force they can't escape. Marcus Aurelius once said, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. And when your silence shows them their own reflection, my friends, that's when the color of regret stains deep. But here's the good news, the empowering truth I want you to hold on to. Silence isn't about punishing anyone. It's about protecting your peace. It's about showing yourself that you don't need to beg for a seat at a table where you should have been valued from the start. You're not walking away because you're weak. You're stepping back because you finally realize your worth. And when you do that, when you choose peace over noise, respect over begging, clarity over chaos, something magical happens. They realize what they lost. And you realize what you gained, yourself. So remember this, folks. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is power. Silence is clarity. And silence is freedom. Write it down in the comments. Silence is power. And if this message hits you right here, smash that like button, subscribe for more, and stay with me. Because the next part will show you exactly what happens in those quiet moments when they finally feel the loss they never thought would come. Number 1. The echo of absence. You don't know the value of water until the well runs dry. That line has echoed across centuries, and it's as true in human relationships as it is in survival. My friends, silence is the dry well. It's the moment when the flow they relied on, the steady stream of presence, texts, calls, reassurances, suddenly stops. And here's the truth that stings. It doesn't hit them during the chaos. It doesn't hit them during the loud arguments. It doesn't even hit them during the dramatic goodbyes. It hits when the room goes quiet, when their phone doesn't light up, when the rhythm they thought would play forever suddenly drops into silence. That's when the weight of your absence slams into them. Imagine it this way, folks. Think of a heart monitor in a hospital. That steady beep, beep, beep is life. It's reassurance. It's proof that everything is still beating. Now imagine the sound flatlining into silence. That silence isn't just quiet. It's terror. It makes the room heavier, makes the air impossible to breathe. That's what your silence does when you've always been there, always consistent, always reliable. To them, the absence feels like that flat line, like something vital has been lost. And that's when the questions creep in. At first, they tell themselves, oh, they're just busy, distracted, maybe caught up with something. They shrug it off because denial is easier than facing reality. But as the silence stretches, denial begins to fracture. Did I push too far? Did I mistake their patience for weakness? Did I finally break something that won't be fixed? Those questions aren't loud at first. They whisper. But silence makes whispers scream. Why is it so difficult for them to face this? Because deep down, folks, people confuse your consistency with predictability. They convince themselves that because you always showed up, you always will. It's human arrogance, the lie that love without conditions will never run out. They think your kindness is infinite, your patience unbreakable, your presence guaranteed. And so they test, they dismiss, they overlook, until your silence arrives and the lie they built collapses under its own weight. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The nearer a man comes to a calm mind, the closer he is to strength." That calmness is what rattles them most. They expected noise, anger, pleading, explanations. They thought if they pushed, you'd yell, you'd argue, you'd fight to prove your place. But when you give them calm silence instead, it exposes a truth they can't fight against. You're not playing the game anymore, and without your participation, their control dissolves. Picture it like a lighthouse on a stormy shore. For so long, your light guided them back, no matter how reckless they were with the waves. They took that light for granted, assuming it would always be there. But the day the light goes out, the sea feels different. It feels dangerous. It feels lonely. That's what happens when your silence enters the picture. It turns their world into open water with no compass. And here's where the fear begins. Fear of being replaceable. Fear of realizing they treated something rare like it was common. Fear of facing the reflection in the mirror that says, "You didn't just lose someone, you lost a good one." They won't admit it out loud, but fear eats at them in the quiet. They replay conversations, scroll through memories, dig through old texts, trying to find the moment it shifted. They search for proof that you still care, but silence gives them none. And the more they search, the more they feel that hollow ache that tells them it's gone. But let's break a lie right here, my friends. The lie that silence means weakness. Society teaches us that to care is to keep talking, to keep chasing, to keep proving. They'll tell you that if you loved, you'd never stop showing it. But that's not love, that's exhaustion. Silence is not surrender. Silence is strength. It is the art of valuing yourself enough to stop begging for validation. It is the quiet but powerful reminder that respect is not negotiable. And yet, rising into that silence is not easy. It feels unnatural at first. You want to speak, you want to explain, you want to make them see. But think of it like training a muscle. Silence is discipline. At first, it aches. At first, it feels like you're holding back a flood. But over time, you realize you've tapped into something greater: self-control, self-respect, and a power they cannot manipulate. Because words can be twisted, actions can be questioned, but silence cannot be debated. It simply exists. It forces them to face themselves without your help. And that's why, my friends, silence is not just absence, it's impact. It creates a void they cannot fill with noise, pride, or distractions. It leaves them staring into the emptiness you once filled, and the longer they stare, the more they realize just how much of their stability was tied to you. It's a slow burn, but one they cannot escape. So here's what I want you to take from this. Don't fear the silence. Don't rush to break it just because it feels heavy. That heaviness is the weight of truth, the weight of your worth being recalculated in their mind. Let them feel it. Let them sit in it. Let them realize that your silence is not punishment. It's the proof of your power. Write this in the comments right now. My silence has power. Show them, show yourself, and show the world around you that you understand this truth. Because your silence will echo louder than any explanation ever could. And stay with me, my friends, because what comes next will show you the exact moment that echo turns into panic, when they realize control has slipped from their hands and the fear of loss becomes too heavy to deny. Number 2, the collapse of control. The greatest power is often simple refusal. My friends, that's what your silence becomes, a refusal. A refusal to keep playing their games, a refusal to let yourself be manipulated, a refusal to keep pouring energy into a bottomless pit. And let me tell you, folks, that refusal cuts deeper than any angry word ever could. Because when your silence arrives, it doesn't just take away your voice, it takes away their control. For so long, they thought they had influence over you. They believed if they pulled back, you would chase. If they tested you, you'd prove yourself. If they gave you coldness, you'd respond with warmth. That's the dynamic they got comfortable with, the unspoken contract where they dictated the rhythm, and you followed. But when you go silent, when you step back with no explanation, that contract shatters. Suddenly, the rules no longer work, and that realization terrifies them. Picture it like a puppeteer, folks. For years they tugged at strings, and you moved, not because you were weak, but because you cared, because you believed love meant showing up, no matter what. But the day you cut those strings, the puppet show ends. They lift their hand expecting you to dance, but nothing happens. That silence, your refusal, exposes the truth. The control was an illusion all along. And what happens next? Fear. At first, they won't admit it. They'll tell themselves they're just cooling off. They'll come back. But deep down, the panic begins to build, because people only feel secure when they believe they have influence. The moment that influence disappears, they start to spiral. Questions invade their mind. Why aren't they reacting? Why aren't they chasing? Why aren't they proving they still care? Every unanswered question is a crack in their pride, a fracture in the control they thought was unshakable. Here's the lie they lived under, my friends. They thought kindness meant endless supply. They mistook patience for weakness, availability for desperation. And as long as you responded, even if it was to argue or defend yourself, they felt in control. Because reaction means relevance. But silence means they no longer matter enough to move you, and that is a truth heavy enough to crush their ego. Seneca once said, "He who is brave is free," and your silence, my friends, is the ultimate act of bravery, because it frees you from the prison of someone else's control. It's not easy. It takes courage to resist the urge to respond, to defend, to explain. But when you do, you're not just walking away, you're rising above. And that rise, that freedom, is what exposes their dependence on your energy. Imagine a chessboard. For so long they made moves, confident you would counter. They set traps, expecting you to fall into them. But when you stop playing, when you simply remove your pieces from the board, the game itself collapses. There's no victory for them, no satisfaction, no final checkmate. Only silence. And nothing unnerves a player more than realizing the opponent they thought they controlled has simply walked away from the game. Now let's talk about the fear that follows. At first, it's subtle. A quick glance at their phone, hoping for your message, a late-night scroll through your social media, looking for signs you still care. Then it grows louder. They check more often. They ask mutual friends about you. They craft excuses to reach out. "Hey, just checking if you're good." But beneath the casual words is desperation, because your silence has flipped the script. They're no longer in control of the narrative. You are, and this is where the difficulty lies, for them and for you. For them, it's the difficulty of facing a truth they never wanted to confront. They pushed too far, they took too much, they treated value like it was guaranteed. For you, it's the difficulty of holding steady. Because silence isn't just hard for them, it's hard for you too. You'll want to break it, to explain yourself, to give them closure. But closure is not your responsibility, my friends. Silence is not about punishing them. It's about protecting you. Think of it like a fortress. Words are gates. They can be opened, twisted, broken into. But silence is stone, impenetrable, and when you stand behind those walls, they finally realize they can't get in anymore. That's when panic becomes regret. Because nothing feels heavier than the loss of control over someone who once gave them everything. And here's what they'll never admit out loud. Losing control over you feels like losing power over their own world. They were used to being able to trigger a response, to feel validated by your reactions. Now, in the silence, they're forced to see the truth. They never controlled you, you allowed it. And once you choose not to allow it, the entire illusion collapses. But let me remind you of something powerful, folks. Your silence is not just about them, it's about you. It's about finally saying, "I choose peace over chaos. I choose dignity over desperation. I choose myself." That's not cruelty, that's clarity, and clarity is the beginning of real strength. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Your silence is that realization in action. It is proof that you will no longer be defined by how much noise they can stir in your life. You are defined by your ability to master yourself. And when they feel that shift, when they see that they can no longer bend you to their will, the control they clung to crumbles. So let me leave you with this, my friends. Do not fear the collapse of their control. Welcome it, because what feels like the end of something is really the beginning of your freedom. And the more you embrace that silence, the more you realize how strong you've become. Write it in the comments right now. I am in control. Say it, show it, let the world know you've claimed that truth. Because your silence doesn't just remove their control, it restores yours. And stay with me, because what comes next will expose the moment they start measuring everything and everyone against you. And that's when regret really begins to sting. Number 3. The weight of the little things. It's not the mountains ahead that wear you down, my friends. It's the pebble in your shoe, and it carries more truth in relationships than most people want to admit. Because when someone finally realizes they lost you, it's rarely the big things that haunt them. Not the vacations, not the grand gestures, not even the dramatic goodbye. No, my friends, it's the little things. The small, everyday acts of love and consistency they overlooked, dismissed, or labeled as ordinary. And when those little things vanish in the silence, they start to feel like everything. Picture it like this, folks. Imagine your favorite song, not the chorus, not the big climactic notes everyone belts out. No, I'm talking about those subtle background harmonies, those tiny details that give the song its soul. You don't always notice them while the music's playing, but take them away, and suddenly the song feels flat, empty, incomplete. That's what happens when you step back. They thought your good morning text was routine. Your "did you get home safe" was unnecessary. Your remembering the small details was predictable. But when all of it stops, when the harmonies of your care disappear, their life feels flat. And that emptiness is deafening. At first, they might brush it off. They'll tell themselves, "Oh, it's nothing. I didn't need those messages anyway." But as days turn into weeks, the silence echoes. The phone that once lit up with your presence now feels like dead weight in their hand. The little things they used to roll their eyes at, they start to crave. That check-in after a long day. That way you noticed their tone shift even before they said they were upset. The way you remembered their favorite food or the story they told once and thought you'd forget. All of it comes back, not as memories, but as regrets. Why do the little things matter so much, my friends? Because small actions reveal big truths. Anyone can show up for the highlight reel, the birthdays, the holidays, the big dramatic gestures. But it takes someone rare to show up in the quiet, ordinary moments. That's what separates a good man or woman from the crowd. And that's exactly what they miss when you're gone. And here's the painful irony. They thought those little things meant nothing because they came so easily from you. They thought, oh, that's just who they are. That's what they do. But what they failed to see is how rare that is. In a world full of distractions, you gave attention. In a culture obsessed with self, you gave care. In a sea of temporary, you gave consistency. And once it's gone, once no one else gives them that same energy, the weight of what they lost starts to crush them. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." And you were, my friends. You didn't argue. You didn't beg them to notice. You simply gave. Day after day, word after word, gesture after gesture. And now in the silence, those acts echo louder than any speech you could give. Because silence doesn't erase the memory of your effort, it magnifies it. Let's break a lie right here. The lie that big, flashy acts of love are what matter most. Society sells us the fairy tale of candlelit dinners, surprise vacations, dramatic proposals. And sure, those moments are beautiful. But the truth? They're not what people miss at 2 a.m. when they can't sleep. They're not what they ache for when they're upset and no one checks in. They're not what echoes in the silence when your presence is gone. What they miss are the pebbles, not the mountains, the steady, unnoticed, priceless details they once brushed aside. And here's the difficult part for them: comparison. Because after you're gone, they don't just sit with silence, they sit with new people, and whether they admit it or not, every new person gets measured against you. That new friend, that new partner, that new maybe this will work connection, it all gets weighed against the little things you gave effortlessly. And that's when the sting cuts deepest, because they realize no one else remembers the details like you. No one else offers the same patience. No one else listens without keeping score. And in that comparison, regret festers. Think of it like coffee, folks. You get used to drinking it a certain way, rich, strong, perfect for you. Then one day it's gone, and someone hands you instant coffee. Technically it's still coffee, but it doesn't taste the same. It doesn't satisfy. It feels like a downgrade. That's exactly what happens when they step into something new after losing you. On the surface, it works. But deep down, they know it's not the same. Now, let's be real, my friends. Why do they only realize this after you're gone? Why couldn't they appreciate it while they had it? The answer is human nature. People take consistency for granted because it doesn't scream for attention. It's like air. You only notice it when you can't breathe. They thought your presence was permanent, your care was endless, your patience was unbreakable. But silence proves otherwise. And in that proof they're forced to face their own blindness. But here's where the motivation comes in, for you. Don't regret giving those little things. Don't beat yourself up for being consistent, caring, attentive, because those acts weren't weakness, they were strength. They weren't signs of desperation, they were signs of your character. And even if they didn't value it in the moment, silence ensures they'll value it later. Maybe not in words, maybe not in apologies, but in the quiet ache of regret that follows them long after you're gone. Seneca said, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." They craved more, overlooked what they had, and in doing so became poor. You, on the other hand, gave fully, and that makes you rich. Rich in integrity, rich in self-respect, rich in the kind of strength silence brings. So here's what I want you to hold on to. The weight of the little things doesn't belong to you anymore. It belongs to them. Let them carry it. Let them sit in it. Let them replay those texts they ignored, those gestures they dismissed, those moments they thought were ordinary but now feel priceless. Because that regret is not your burden. It is their teacher. Write this in the comments right now. The little things matter. Say it, show it. Let it be your reminder that your value doesn't vanish just because they failed to see it. You were rare then, you are rare now, and your silence only proves it louder. And stay with me, my friends, because what comes next is the storm inside them when they pretend they're fine, but the silence forces their pride and their emotions into a war they can't win. Number 4, the ego's last stand. Pride costs us more than hunger, thirst, or cold. And my friends, it's a truth that plays out every single time someone realizes they lost you. Because when silence takes over, when your absence grows louder than your words ever did, the battle begins inside of them. And it's not a small battle, it's a war. Pride against regret, ego against emotion. A war they will never admit to you, but one they cannot escape from. At first, their ego is the loudest voice in the room. Ego tells them, "Don't worry, they'll be back." They always come back, Ego convinces them that your silence is just temporary, that you're just sulking, that sooner or later you'll break and chase again. It whispers, they need me more than I need them. This is just a phase. Ego builds a wall of arrogance, brick by brick, to keep them from feeling the sting of regret. But here's the thing, folks, walls may protect you for a moment, but they eventually trap you. And behind that wall, the cracks begin to form. Because while ego is loud, emotion is patient. And emotion doesn't play by ego's rules. Emotion shows up in quiet moments, in the middle of the night when the world is still, in the middle of a song that reminds them of you, in the middle of scrolling through old pictures they swore they'd deleted. Emotion whispers the truth. You pushed too far. You mistook their patience for weakness. You lost someone who actually cared. And no matter how much ego shouts, emotion seeps through the cracks, undeniable and relentless. Imagine it like a courtroom, my friends. Ego is the flashy lawyer, standing tall, making arguments full of confidence and pride. But emotion is the witness they can't silence, the one with evidence, the one who keeps bringing receipts. Every memory, every little thing you did, every consistent act of care becomes evidence against them. And the longer the trial drags on, the more ego starts to lose ground. But let's be real. Why do they cling to ego so hard? Why is it so difficult for them to just admit they miss you, admit they regret losing you? Because pride is the shield people use to protect themselves from vulnerability. Admitting they lost a good one feels like admitting weakness. And weakness, to the ego, is worse than loneliness. So they keep performing. They post the pictures, they laugh too loud, they talk to new people. But behind the mask, the war rages on. Seneca once wrote, "It is not the man who has little, but he who desires more, that is poor." Their ego desires control, desires validation, desires to believe they can have you back whenever they want. But that desire only makes them poorer, more restless, more haunted by what they've lost. Emotion, on the other hand, strips the desire away and forces them to see the truth in the mirror. They didn't just lose anyone, they lost someone who gave them more than most ever will. And here's the irony, folks. The very silence they thought would make them powerful is the silence that weakens them, because silence doesn't play favorites. Silence doesn't care about ego. Silence only reflects the truth. And when your silence continues, when days turn into weeks and you still don't break, their pride begins to crack like thin ice under pressure. They start testing. Maybe they like an old picture of yours. Maybe they send a casual, "Hey, hope you're good." Maybe they linger around your orbit, hoping for a sign that the door is still open. But make no mistake, that's not strength. That's ego gasping for air, desperately trying to keep the upper hand. Think of it like a storm, my friends. Ego is the thunder, loud, dramatic, meant to intimidate. But emotion is the rain, steady, relentless, unavoidable. Thunder might rattle the windows, but it's the rain that soaks through, seeps into the ground, and changes everything. No matter how loud their pride tries to roar, it's emotion that eventually takes over. It always does. And here's the cruel part for them. The moment they finally admit to themselves what they lost, ego still won't let them admit it to you. They'll fight it until the very end, because pride says, don't look desperate. Don't let them see you regret it, and so they stay silent, even as their chest tightens, even as they spiral in private. And while they're fighting themselves, your silence keeps growing stronger. Your calm detachment becomes the one thing they cannot compete with. But let's pause here, my friends, because this isn't just about them, it's about you. It's about why silence is so difficult for you too. Because let's be honest, it's tempting to break it. It's tempting to say, look, I'll explain one last time. I'll show them what they lost, but explanation is food for their ego. It gives them something to hold on to twist, to use as evidence that they still mattered enough to move you. True power is found when you resist that temptation, when you let ego and emotion battle it out inside of them without your interference. That's where growth begins, for you and for them. Marcus Aurelius said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." And when you choose silence, you're choosing not to play the ego's game. You're choosing dignity over drama, calm over chaos, clarity over confusion. You're saying, I don't need to prove anything. My silence is proof enough that, my friends, is a strength few possess. And it's exactly why the war inside them becomes so unbearable. So what happens when ego finally loses? When pride cracks under the weight of silence and emotion takes over? That's when the regret floods in. That's when they replay every ignored text, every cold shoulder, every moment they mistook your care for weakness. That's when they feel the weight of the little things they once dismissed, the presence they once overlooked, the love they thought they'd never lose. And in that moment, their ego can't protect them anymore. The walls crumble, the truth hits, and it stings in a way they'll carry quietly for a long, long time. Here's what I want you to take from this, folks. Their ego may be loud, but it's not stronger than truth. Their pride may posture, but it's not stronger than silence. And while they fight their war in private, your task is simple. Hold the line. Stay silent. Stay strong. Because in doing so, you're not just breaking their illusion, you're building your freedom. Write this in the comments right now. I rise above pride. Show them, show yourself, show the world around you that you refuse to play the ego's game. Because your silence doesn't just collapse their control, it exposes the war inside them that they cannot win. And stay with me, my friends, because what comes next is even heavier. The comparisons they start making, the constant measuring of every new person against the one they lost, you. And that, I promise you, is when regret begins to haunt them like a shadow they can't escape. Number 5. The quiet comparison. You only realize the true value of someone when you try to replace them and fail. That line, my friends, is the essence of this stage. After your silence, after your absence becomes real, they begin doing something they'll never admit out loud: comparing. Comparing every person, every conversation, every new connection against the one they lost, you. And here's the hard truth. Comparison is a cruel teacher. It doesn't whisper gently. It slaps. It burns. It gnaws at them in ways pride can't defend against. See, at first, they convince themselves it'll be easy. They'll tell themselves, if one person leaves, I'll find another. There's always someone else. That's the ego talking. Ego paints this illusion that people are interchangeable, that attention is abundant, that love can be replaced like swapping out a phone battery. But life has a way of stripping ego bare. And when the new person arrives, someone who doesn't know their favorite song, doesn't remember their stories, doesn't notice their moods shift before they even speak, that's when the reality cuts in. They thought they could replace rare with common, and in the silence, they realize they can't. Picture it like coffee, folks. You've been drinking the same rich, strong brew every morning, consistent, comforting, exactly how you like it. Then, one day, it's gone. Someone hands you instant coffee instead. Technically, it's still coffee. It'll wake you up, it'll fill the cup, but deep down, you know it's not the same. It doesn't have the depth, the richness, the care put into every detail. And every sip is a reminder of what you used to have. That's what the comparison feels like. On the surface, someone new may look fine, but deep down, the flavor is off, and the longing begins. Why does this hit them so hard? Because they start realizing the things they thought were ordinary in you were actually extraordinary. Your patience, your attentiveness, your way of listening without judgment, your consistency when the world was chaotic. Those weren't just habits, they were proof of your character. And when they stack that against someone new who doesn't show up the same way, it's like comparing a masterpiece to a copy. The more they compare, the more they see what they lost. Here's the lie we need to break, my friends, the lie that all relationships feel the same. They don't. The energy you bring into someone's life cannot be duplicated. They might find distraction, they might find chemistry, they might even find temporary excitement. But what they won't find is you. And when the silence forces them to sit with that truth, regret becomes a constant companion. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth." Their ego gave them the opinion that you were replaceable, the perspective that someone else could easily fill your shoes. But silence forces them into truth. And the truth is, there's no replacement for a good man or woman who gave authentically, consistently, selflessly. They can distract themselves all they want, but truth sits heavier at night when the noise fades. And here's the irony. Comparison isn't just about the new person being less than you. Sometimes it's about them being confronted with themselves. Because when they measure the new against you, they're not just noticing what the other lacks. They're realizing how much you gave. It's like holding a mirror to their past and seeing how blind they were. They're forced to admit, even if only to themselves, "I had something rare, and I let it slip." Think of it like upgrading technology. Imagine someone trading a phone that always worked flawlessly for a cheaper model because they got bored. At first, it feels fine. They convince themselves it'll do the job. But then the screen glitches, the battery drains faster, the quality feels off. And suddenly, they're remembering all the things the old phone did effortlessly. That's what happens in the quiet comparison. They begin to see how smooth, how rare, how valuable your consistency was compared to the messiness of someone new. And here's the part they'll never say out loud. Comparison makes them restless. It steals their peace, because even when they're laughing with someone new, even when they're pretending to move on, their mind drifts back. They notice the way this new person doesn't understand their silence like you did. They notice how they can't lean on them in the same way. They notice the lack. And once you notice lack, you can't unsee it. But let's be honest, my friends, it's not easy for them to face this truth. Pride will keep trying to fight it. Pride will tell them, no, this new person is better. The past is gone. I don't miss them, but emotion has a way of creeping back in at the quietest times. Lying in bed at night, driving alone with music playing, scrolling through memories they swore didn't matter. In those moments, the comparison isn't avoidable. It's inevitable. Seneca said, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." And in this stage, they're starving. They crave the little things you gave freely. They crave the peace your presence brought. They crave the consistency they once mocked. But craving doesn't bring it back. Craving only deepens regret. Now, let's turn this back to you. Why is this so important for you to understand? because too often people regret giving those little things. They think, I wasted my time, I gave too much. But listen to me, your consistency wasn't wasted. Your love wasn't wasted. Those comparisons they're making, that's your legacy. Even in silence, even after you've walked away, your effort is still teaching them, haunting them, shaping them. And that, my friends, is power. So don't ever believe the lie that being a good person, being consistent, being caring makes you weak. It doesn't. It makes you unforgettable. Because time might dull the memory of big arguments or dramatic scenes, but it sharpens the memory of small, consistent care, and that's what echoes longest. Here's what I want you to hold on to. Your silence isn't just absence, it's contrast. It turns everything that comes after into a shadow of what you gave, and that shadow follows them everywhere. They might smile, they might laugh, they might even convince the world they've moved on. But every new connection is weighed against the standard you set, and deep down they know nothing measures up. So write this in the comments right now. I set the standard. Say it, show it, let it be the reminder that your love, your effort, your presence isn't ordinary, it's rare, and once it's gone, it leaves a mark no comparison can erase. Stay with me, folks, because what comes next is the breaking point. The moment where ego and pride can't hold the wall anymore, and seeing you grow without them cuts deeper than anything else they'll ever feel. That, my friends, is where the silence hits hardest. Number 6, the shock of growth. Nothing is more attractive than someone who doesn't need you to shine. My friends, this is the moment where silence transforms into something even more powerful: growth. At first, they think you're quiet means you're hurting, sulking, waiting for them to notice. They convince themselves you're sitting in the corner, scrolling through memories, hoping for a second chance. That illusion comforts them because it means they still have control. But then something shifts. Instead of crumbling, you start building. Instead of breaking, you start glowing. And when they finally see that glow without them, that's when the shock cuts deeper than anything else. Picture this, a garden they once neglected. For so long they walked through it carelessly, trampling flowers, ignoring the beauty, assuming it would always bloom for them. Then one day they leave, expecting the garden to wither. But when they return, they don't find dead soil. They find a forest, taller trees, brighter flowers, a place that flourished not because of them, but in spite of them. That's what your growth looks like in their eyes. They thought silence would equal decay, but instead it became the soil for your transformation. And here's what stings most. They didn't expect it. They thought the story was predictable. They leave, you chase. They pull back, you prove. They hurt, you explain. That's the script they wrote in their head. But when your silence turns into self-focus, when your energy shifts inward instead of outward, it breaks their narrative completely. Because now, the person they once thought they controlled has stepped into a version of themselves they can no longer touch. The fear starts small. They see a photo of you smiling in a way you didn't before. They hear you've been working out, traveling, picking up new habits. They notice your energy shift, lighter, freer, calmer. And instead of joy for you, what do they feel? Panic, because growth proves something their ego never wanted to face. You didn't need them to evolve. You didn't need their approval, their attention, their presence to glow. You were always capable, and now the silence has given you space to reveal it. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The impediment to action advances action." What stands in the way becomes the way they thought their absence, their games, their neglect would block you, hold you back, diminish you. But instead, it became the way. The obstacle turned into the fuel for your rise. And when they see that, my friends, it shakes them. Because deep down, they realize they weren't your strength. They were the weight you had to drop to fly. Imagine a bird with a stone tied to its leg. For so long, the bird struggles to take off, flapping, straining, never reaching its true height. But the moment the stone is cut loose, the bird doesn't just fly. It soars. That's the shock of your growth. They thought they were the wind beneath your wings. Now they see they were the stone. And that truth doesn't just bruise the ego, it crushes it. Why does this hit them harder than the silence itself? Because silence leaves room for doubt. In the early days, they tell themselves, oh, they're just quiet because they're hurt. They'll come back once they've cooled down. But growth leaves no room for that lie. Growth is visible. It's undeniable. It's seeing you stronger, healthier, happier, freer, and realizing none of it has anything to do with them. That's when regret transforms into something heavier, something permanent. Seneca said, "Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity." And my friends, your growth isn't luck, it's preparation. While they were busy assuming you'd always be there, you were preparing. While they thought silence meant weakness, you were quietly turning it into strength. And the opportunity? The moment you stopped chasing, stopped explaining, stopped wasting energy where it wasn't valued, that was the door you walked through. And behind that door is the version of you they never believed they'd have to face, the version who shines without them. Let's talk about the difficulty for them, because this is where the pain intensifies. Growth forces comparison, not just with others, but with themselves. When they see you glowing, they're forced to confront who they became in your absence, stagnant, stuck, unchanging. And comparison has teeth. It gnaws at their pride. It whispers, look at what they've become. Look at what you've wasted. Look at how far they've risen while you stayed the same. And that whisper, no matter how much they try to drown it out, becomes a roar they can't silence. And here's the part they'll never confess. They don't just miss you, they miss the chance to grow with you, because deep down they realize you weren't just consistent, you were inspiring, you weren't just present, you were elevating. You weren't just loving, you were building. And by losing you, they lost the mirror that reflected who they could have been. Now they're left watching from the sidelines, seeing you transform, and knowing they no longer have a seat at your table. Think of it like fire, folks. For so long, they thought they controlled the flame, that you needed their spark to stay lit. But silence turned you into a wildfire, self-sustaining, unstoppable, spreading light in places they can't reach. And when they see it, it terrifies them, because there's nothing more painful than realizing you underestimated someone who now outshines you. But let's be honest, it's not easy for you either. Growth after silence requires discipline. It requires fighting the urge to check if they notice, to post for their attention, to seek validation from their regret. True growth isn't about proving them wrong, it's about proving yourself right. And when you do, when you commit to rising for you, not for them, the glow becomes authentic. And that authenticity is what makes the shock hit them even harder. Because they can't argue with authenticity. They can't twist it, they can't deny it, they can't diminish it. So here's your reminder, my friends. Silence is powerful, but growth is unstoppable. Silence makes them wonder, but growth makes them know. Know that they lost someone rare. Know that they underestimated you. know that they'll never again be part of the story you're now writing. And that realization doesn't just sting, it haunts. Write this in the comments right now. I glow without them. Say it, show it, let the world around you feel it, because your silence may have started the process, but your growth finishes it. It seals the truth in their heart that losing you wasn't just a temporary setback, it was the defining mistake of their life. And stay with me, because what comes next is even more brutal. The silence doesn't just make them compare, and your growth doesn't just shock them. It forces them to face a mirror they can't escape. And that, my friends, is when the weight of their regret becomes unbearable. Number 7. The mirror of silence. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. And my friends, this is exactly what silence does. Your silence is a mirror. Not the kind you glance at to fix your hair or straighten your shirt. No, this is the kind of mirror people avoid because it doesn't show the surface. It shows the truth. It reflects back the cracks they tried to hide, the mistakes they tried to excuse, the reality they ran from. And when your silence forces them to look, it's brutal, it's heavy, it's undeniable. At first, they fight it. They distract themselves, surround themselves with noise, tell themselves stories that protect their pride. They'll be back. They still care. This is just temporary. Ego feeds them comfort, the same way a lullaby calms a child. But silence is patient, and patience has teeth. No matter how much they run, the mirror always waits. And the longer your silence stretches, the clearer that reflection becomes. Imagine walking into an empty house after a storm, my friends. The walls are still standing, but the windows are shattered, the floor is flooded, the air smells of loss. That's what it feels like when silence sets in. The house is their heart, and for the first time, they can see the damage they caused. No more blaming you, no more deflecting. Just raw evidence of how carelessly they treated something rare. The mirror shows them what they lost, and worse, it shows them who they became. And here's the cruel part. Silence doesn't just reflect the past, it amplifies it. Those texts they ignored, now they replay them in their mind, realizing how much care was in every word. Those nights you stayed up listening even when you were tired, now they feel the emptiness of having no one to lean on. Every overlooked gesture, every dismissed act of love returns like echoes in an empty canyon, louder, heavier, sharper. That's the mirror, folks. It doesn't let them escape. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts, and when silence removes your presence, their thoughts turn darker, heavier. The mirror forces them to see the colors they tried to ignore, the arrogance, the pride, the dismissiveness. And for the first time, they have to admit it wasn't you who failed. It was them." Why is this so difficult for them? Because facing the truth means killing the illusion, and illusions are comfortable. They'd rather believe you were weak, that you needed them, that your patience meant you had no options. But when silence stretches, when your glow grows without them, the illusion dies, and in its place stands a reflection they can't defend against. They pushed away someone who gave everything, and now that someone is gone. Think of it like a play, folks. For so long they were on stage, acting, wearing masks, convinced the spotlight was on them. But when you went silent, you didn't just walk off the stage, you took the audience with you. The applause stopped. The lights dimmed. And suddenly they were left performing to an empty room, forced to face the hollowness of their own act. That's what silence does. It strips away the show and leaves only the truth. And what about you? Let's be honest. It's not easy holding that silence. You'll feel tempted to break it, to soften the reflection, to give them a way out of the mirror, because you know the weight they're feeling. You've seen the cracks forming. But my friends, this is where your discipline matters most, because the mirror isn't cruelty. It's clarity. It's the only chance they have to truly see themselves. And if you shatter that mirror too soon, you rob them of that lesson. Seneca said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." And silence reveals how much of your time was wasted on explaining, on proving, on justifying your worth to someone who couldn't see it. The mirror shows them how much they took and how little they gave. And that realization, once it sets in, becomes regret. Not the fleeting kind, but the kind that lingers, the kind that turns into a shadow following them wherever they go. And here's what makes it permanent: growth. They don't just see the mirror of who they were with you, they see the mirror of who you've become without them, the version of you that no longer needs their validation. The version of you that glows, rises, and inspires without chasing. That reflection is the final cut, because it forces them to see not just what they lost, but what they'll never have again. My friends, silence is not absence, it's impact. It's the mirror that shows people what words could never teach. And when that mirror stands in front of them, when they see the truth with no filter, that's when regret becomes real. That's when they finally understand they didn't just lose someone, they lost a good one, and good ones don't circle back forever. So let me leave you with this. Don't break the silence. Don't shatter the mirror. Let them face it. Let them wrestle with the reflection, because in the end, their regret is not your punishment. It's their teacher. And your silence is not their closure. It's your freedom. Write this in the comments right now. My silence is my power. Say it, show it, and let the world know you've chosen clarity over chaos, dignity over desperation, truth over illusion. And if this message spoke to you, smash that like button, subscribe for more, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because silence, my friends, is the mirror, and once it shows the truth, there's no going back.